Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of Live Free Podcast, where we talk about living a life of freedom. Living a life of freedom, guys. And we know that freedom comes in many forms and shapes and faces, but wisdom helps you discern the difference. So today on this podcast, we're going to be talking about what does freedom look like to you? And we all know it's not a one size fit all situation because all of us struggle with different issues, different situations, and different things that ail us. But we know for sure that it's not a one size fit all. Freedom may look like one thing for one person, it may look like another thing for another. So on this channel, I promote clarity, mental, physical, emotional, relational, social, and financial freedom. And it's all about growth and self-improvement. So in today's episode, guys, we will be talking about the face of freedom. And what does that look like for you? If you're interested in shows like this or topics like this, download our episodes and tune into our broadcast. We will be broadcasting every single week. Let's go. So we're going to be talking about three particular key topics here. Three in particular topics. We have to ask ourselves some real questions in order to get to the root and get to the meaning of this all. You know, all of the things that we go through that ail us or the situations that we face every day. And what does freedom look like to you? For some, it may be a new career. You feel like you're in bondage with your job or your business, or it may be just freedom look like travel to you. It may look like, being an entrepreneur so that you'll have more freedom with your family, more time. And then for some is freedom is just being able to have a child. Sometimes that's an issue for some of us. Not being able to have kids when you want to, have kids, or it could be sickness, disease, or anything that you're dealing with, and you feel like you're going through it alone, or just deliverance from toxic people. Some things are just toxic, and you don't realize how toxic it is until you're out of it. So, what does that look like? What does freedom look like to you, people? And it's not a one size fit all situation. So, we're going to talk about the many faces of freedom and some particular ways that we can actually be free from those things that ail us, that we look at as being bondage. This is all about being free. So, the first form of freedom, the key element that we're going to talk about is let's talk about relationships. Let's talk about relationships as it relates to marriage. Let's go there. I am now divorced. I was married for 6 years. We dated for 2 before being married. So let's talk about marriage. Because to some, that's a form of bondage. Marriage can be a beautiful and wonderful thing when you are connected to the right person. It can be a wonderful path, life decision that you can make and have a beautiful marriage. Not talking about a problem-free marriage. We're not talking about unrealistic expectations. We're not talking about an alternate reality. That's not what we're talking about on here. We keep it 100 every time on here. We're talking about when it's with the right person. And it may not be the perfect person, but it can sure be the right person. So let's talk about marriage, because I know that a lot of people, and this is based on years of experience and years of conversations with people that have been married, divorced, myself as an example. people that are still married, have conversations with. People that are just going through the motions, I have conversations with. So for some, being married is bondage. Um, and then you ask yourself, we get into these situations and we ask ourselves, how did we get here? So let's talk about the little small decisions that we make every day that decides our tomorrow. And I know that sounds a bit cliche when we say what we do today is going to affect our tomorrow, but I can assure you the decisions that we are making on a daily basis is creating a future, and is creating our world that we do live in. And what makes us make decisions that destructively put us in destructive cycles of bondage. And every time we look up, we're disappointed. Something's happening to us. We're not happy. Where does it all come from? Where does it all start? The typical human in us want to look at the other person, but it's one thing for something to happen to you and you didn't know it was going to happen to you, but it's a whole nother situation to create the storm and then get mad when it rains. So sometimes we create our own storms, and sometimes we find ourselves in situations that we didn't know we'll end up in. And again, at the end of the day, it's still a choice. And the reason why I say that is because even though you may end up in a situation you don't really want to be in, it's your choice to stay there. One thing I've learned is every day we wake up, every single day that we get up in the morning, we have a decision to make when we get up in the morning. Decision to deal with certain things, and certain things we decide to deal with and don't want to deal with. So even though things are happening to us sometimes beyond our control, we have a choice to continue in it, even though it came and we didn't know it was coming. Because I know that's the first thing we'll say. Oh, I didn't even know if I had known. If I had known, well, now you know. So what is stopping you from moving forward, to going in another direction? So basically, today we're going to be talking about the decisions that we make in the face of freedom. Like, what does that look like? What does it really, 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 really look like? So our decisions that we make determines our future. And then sometimes it's not just our future. We have responsibility if there's kids involved or other people involved that it affects just as much. When do we cut the ties and cut the cords? At what point do we cut the cords? I know for some people, cutting the cord is not even an option. They rather die in it and be miserable than cut a cord. So let's talk about that type of bondage, that type of mental, because that at some point it's 90% of it is mental. Some of it is physical, but 90% of it is mental. You feeling like there is no way out, there is no hope. So let's talk about that. Because I know that if you can get free in the mind, then everything else will follow. Everything else will follow, but it's not easy. I went through it. It's not easy, especially when you are, it depends on what level you are in the situation, because I was married to a narcissist and I could not for the life of me understand what was happening. And when I say that, I don't say that to put the person down, because I'm not into that either. I'm not into that. I'm into taking accountability for the things, that role that I play in situations, because it's not just one person. What role did I play in the situation? But at the same time, Sometimes you're in situations where it's like you're dating the Riddler or the Joker. It's like you're married to the Riddler or the Joker. And you cannot put your finger on it. And you do not know what's happening, but you know it's messing with your mental. And you know that, okay, so let me get into it. Because just talking about it is not enough. What am I talking about when I say messing with your mental? I mean, people pretending to be something that they're not. It looks real to you on the outside, but on the inside, it's rotten. It's rotten. I had a dream like maybe, I want to say 4 weeks ago, that I was eating a banana. And I was looking at the banana from the outside, and the banana looked perfect. But when I bit into the banana, it was black. And it was like rotted on the inside. And it wasn't a rotted like what you see, like a banana that's brown first before it becomes rotten looking. It wasn't that. It was like, for lack of a better, way to describe it is, you see, it was like a black substance that was injected in the middle of the banana. Now the outside looks pretty ripe and beautiful, and I took the banana in my dream and I threw it down, and I say, see, that's what I'm talking about. Showing, it looked like it was right, but I'm like, I done bit into something that was nasty. And it was a lot of it in there too. It wasn't just like I bit it and that was it. It was a lot of whatever that black stuff was. And I threw it down immediately and stopped eating it. Thank God I didn't continue to eat it because then that would have been another message altogether. But yeah, I'm just back to the podcast. I'm just trying to get direction as to which way I'm going to take this. But back to the podcast. So marriage is a form of bondage. And when do you get out? When do you stay in? Only that individual will know. Only that individual, because it's different for circumstances for different people at different times. Mine was totally faith-based. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm a believer in the power, not just a believer, but believer in power and demonstration of the Holy Spirit. So a lot of my answers came from dreams. It came from actual events that happened. The strategic prayers. It's not enough to pray. You have to be strategic. You have to have a bullseye when you're praying. When it's different prayers for different things, but in certain circumstances, it requires a strategy. And God will download strategies from heaven's throne to give you direction, to give you peace, and to give you insight on what is happening around you. Because a lot of things, most of the things, if not all of the things that we deal with, it's a spiritual battle. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, right? So these things are spiritual battles, things that are unseen, and only a spirit, God, can deal with a spirit that you're dealing with, because you're a spiritual being, but you're living on this earth. Okay. So a lot of my answers and a lot of my questions and a lot of things that insight that I got was due to me having a personal relationship, being able to hear the voice of God, being able to have a dream, being able to interpret the dream, and just being able to know when God has given me a sign. We all have ways that God communicate with us because He created us. He knows how we function and what gets our attention. So God deals with me in signs, dreams, visions, dark speech, parables, a lot of different ways He deals with me. I get maybe a confirmation from someone else, or I have an internal word. The Holy Spirit will mention something to me, and I'll go off of that. But then you'll connect that piece with another piece that he told you 2 weeks ago. And the only way this works without being confusing and misled and tricked by the enemy, because he can disguise himself as an angel of light as well. The only way that this really works is a personal relationship. And that is how I was able to get out of that bondage of that marriage I was in. I didn't even know it was narcissism, but I kept asking God. I kept saying, Lord, what is it? I don't understand what's going on. No matter what I do, it's not right. Everything I do is wrong. Everything I say is wrong. If somebody else do something, it's praises. But if I do it, it's god awful, So it's nothing that I can do to please. But the flip side of that coin, what really had me confused, it wasn't just that. The other flip side of the coin was it's easy to kind of see where you're going with someone when you guys are arguing every single day. That wasn't the case in my house. It wasn't like a sex. It wasn't like a cooking. It wasn't like a. It was a weird situation. That's how I knew I needed God, and that's why I didn't understand what it was until I started praying and specifically and asking God, what is this? Because we're not fighting. Don't get me wrong. We had arguments. But it was never anything that would escalate it to disrespect or anything like that. My house was pretty quiet. You know what I'm saying? It was pretty a peaceful place to walk in because it was, not that type of environment. So I could not put my finger on it. It could be things are going so well. And then you'll walk up on a conversation that he didn't even know you were listening to. You'll walk in the house and he'll not even hear the door, stuff like that. And a whole conversation is going on about you when you didn't even know nothing was even wrong. Because we didn't fight like that. So my thing was a little different. It's easier to me to deal with people when I know where they come from. When you know where people are coming from, it's easier to deal with people. But it's the people that pretend and put on a front and act like it's okay when it's really not okay. And then you come to realize it's really not you, but it's an internal thing going on with them. So they're projecting on you. Not to say I was perfect. I'm not saying that either, because nobody's perfect. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying to you that if you're in a situation, and this is my experience, if you're in a situation and in your situation, nobody has said anything was wrong, but yet you're being targeted. And you don't understand why. When you try to have a conversation, nobody wants to talk. That's a mental craziness. That would drive you nuts, because you're thinking, okay, if we talk about it, we get to the root of it. But when you can't tell a person what it was that they did to you, or if you walk up on something, or if you hear a conversation and you're trying to figure out, and this wasn't a one-off. Okay, this wasn't a one-off, because a lot of times people do hold things in and they don't feel like they can talk to people. And so they have outlets and they do talk to other people. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about multiple situations. I'll give you another example. And this is nobody but God once again. That's why I say it had to be God for me. I don't know what it is for everybody else, but it was only God that pulled me through. So one other situation was I was going to just maybe, let's say 13 years ago, get my real estate license. I had been laid off from my job of 11 years. And I said, well, let me go get my real estate license. And throughout that whole entire process, he was very supportive, and we wasn't hurting for nothing, money and all that type of stuff, because even in that phase, I still had a 6-month severance, so, I like to kind of get more details, because I know people like, well, maybe he was mad because she wasn't working. Well, maybe no. So I'm going to give you the details. It wasn't even that type of situation. He was well off. So that wasn't even the situation. Money wasn't the issue. So in the situation, it's also like, how can I put it? It was, so I was getting my real estate license, and throughout that entire process, very encouraging, very supportive. Again, these are not things that you would even think is happening because of the way his demeanor was. So I failed the test once. I was like, oh my God, no big deal. Failed the test twice. I started crying. I called him when I was leaving. I was like, oh my God, I failed. He's like, it's okay, baby. It's okay. I'll pay for the next one. Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's okay. That type of stuff is what I'm talking about. Like, and then it turned out to be something crazy. So then failed that test the second time. And when I left that morning for the third time, and we're talking about like 4 weeks apart here, 2 weeks apart. So it's over a period of time. We knew that his life insurance was expiring. And so he was going to renew his life insurance, and he had already did the research and found another insurance company. So he had told me the lady would be coming by the house or whatever. And I knew I was going to take my test for the third time that morning. And so that was no big deal. I didn't even think nothing of it. And it's not going where you think it's going. It's not adultery or anything like that in terms of that situation. But I had went ahead and went to take my test, and I was so excited. I passed my test, so I couldn't wait to get home. Third time's a charm. Passed my test, super excited. And so as I was coming in the house, the lady was packing up leaving, and she was so nice. And he introduced me. This is my wife. She passed the real estate exam. Congratulations. He kissed me. Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, that's so awesome, or whatever. And so she left, and he was like, we was talking about my real estate exam, and then I was like, oh, how was it? He was like, oh, it was good. He's like, you should use her too. Like, you should use her. Because he didn't, the policy was his policy. So that's a whole nother situation, guys. So anyway, I was like, okay, yeah, he said everything went good or whatever. So I didn't look at the paperwork. I didn't look at nothing. I was so excited about and plus we didn't have that kind of relationship even from the beginning. It was like his stuff was his stuff. My stuff was my stuff. He was never the type of guy that would want to intermingle anything. So that's another situation. So, but let me say this. That is nothing I knew going into it because we weren't married, so I wouldn't even have expected that. It was only after we got married that I started to see that these things never changed. So you can't expect somebody to be kind of intermingling their personal business when you guys are not even married. Now, you can move in that direction and start discussing personal things and all that. But as far as going into, you don't even know if you're going to really get married. Something may happen. So I didn't expect that. So he did, he put the paperwork up and no big deal. And we was all talking about my real estate exam. That was the focal point. A few days went past, and he said, because he was self-employed, he was like, I'm gonna be taking a job, so I'll be able to. No, he was already. He had already. My bad. He had already taken a job. He worked for himself. So every day in the house, I would be there again. I was at home because I got laid off, and I would hear the Holy Spirit tell me, check the safe. Look in the safe. I ignored that because I was not the type of wife. I'm being honest. I didn't go through his papers, and I did not. I knew it was a safe in the closet, but he didn't know I knew it was in there. I was in there cleaning up the closet actually, and was moving something and hit something hard, and I was like, "What is that?" And that's how I found the safe. But I never even mentioned that to him because I figured that it was hidden behind clothes that was in the closet, so he didn't want me to know it was there. I can tell you story after story, okay? But I'm just trying to give you this one example because this is way too much to go into to say, maybe one day I'll do my testimony and how everything happened. But this little part right here, I just want to use for this particular segment. So I hit the thing and and I kept hearing, check the safe. And so I didn't do it. And I knew it was internal. It was God telling me that. And I was heavily into church, heavily into walking with the Lord. And so weeks went by and I kept hearing, look in the safe. So the day I finally said, forget it, I'm just gonna look in the safe, because if I don't look in the safe, I'm gonna keep hearing look in the safe, right? So he was in his work truck, and his keys to that the safe key was on was actually I'm thinking about it now because I'm thinking, had it been the combination, I would have been out of luck, basically. So the keys was in the office on his desk. And so I went and got the keys. It was the keys to the car, but he never took those keys with him when he went to work in his truck. So those keys were separate. So I went, got the keys, bent down, pulled the safe out. It was a one that with a handle that you can, it was portable. So it was heavy, but it wasn't like I couldn't, it wasn't a big safe. Something that you can just put documents and papers in, that type of safe. And so I found the key that looked like the little key to go there. So I found the key and opened it up as I was stooping down. And when I opened up the safe, I seen nothing but his kid's birth certificate, nothing but his personal papers, nothing related. It was like he lived a single life, like he was not in a marriage. And I was like, well, none of my stuff is in here, all my son's stuff. Me and him didn't have a son together, but I had a son at the time. Not to mention, why would it be in there? Because he never told me about it. So I knew he didn't want it in there. And I looked at the paperwork and I seen the life insurance papers that he had just put in there, some weeks ago. And I looked down and I seen beneficiary. And it said his mom's name. And the contingent, meaning if something happens to her, the next person in line to get anything was his sister. Now, let me paint this picture for you guys. We have been married at that particular time 4 years, almost 4.5 years. He was on my life insurance at my job. He was the beneficiary, not my son. He knew that too. Because I changed everything when we got married. I changed everything over and he knew all that. He had the nerve to tell me when the lady left that day, when he did the new life insurance policy, you should use her, because he knew that I no longer was at that job. So I needed a new policy. And he knew, because of the way I was honoring God and the type of person that he knew the type of person I was, that I would definitely put him as my beneficiary. He knew that. He didn't have that deception. Certain things he didn't have to worry about with me. I was going to do the right thing. So he said, I looked on the paper. I'm sorry, I got distracted. I looked on the paper and I seen his mom and then his sister as the contingent. Now, I had no job at the time. I was on a severance for 6 months. I was 3 months into that severance. And no other nothing. So if something had happened to him at any moment, the got you would have been, you ain't getting nothing. I could not. It felt like somebody had took a big hand, blew it up. You ever seen one of them cartoons where they took their finger and blew into their thumb and blew their hand up and then slapped somebody? I guess that's a Tom and Jerry moment for me, because I'm in that era. And I looked at the paperwork and it looked like somebody slapped me with all their might. And I fell back on the floor. Like I was stooping down and I fell back with the paper. And I said, oh my God. That's all I kept saying was, and that particular day, when the lady was there, he was congratulating me on, my passing my real estate exam. And it was no fighting going on for that to warrant even that behavior, is what I'm trying to explain to you guys. There was nothing happening. We weren't unhappy. You know what I'm saying? So that's probably one of the worst type of people you can be with. A person that pretends like everything is okay when they hate you. That is the worst deception. And then not to mention it's somebody you are married to, that you have committed your life to. So I'm telling you guys, I fell back on that floor and my mouth was just open. And do you know, when he came home, I had to put the keys back, put everything back up, and I said, I wanted God to give it to me the right way to deal with this, because I was in a state of shock. And do you know, when he came in that door, I had to pretend because I wanted to do it the right way. I had to pretend like I didn't even know what I saw. I had to still have sex with him. I had to still, and the reason why is because I wanted things done a certain way. So when I make my exit, I want to know that I tried everything and did everything that was possible that I knew to do that was right. So I didn't want to hijack him when he walked in the house. But when he walked in, I'm just looking at him like, who am I married to? Like, who is this? He's, hey, baby, how's your day? That type of stuff. And I'm like, this dude don't love me. Because the money is the closest thing to people. And you got to know, if you want to know anything about a person, look at how they spend their money. Look what they spend their money on. Money will tell you a lot about people. Money will tell you a lot about people, a whole lot about people. So if you ever want to know what the closest thing to people is, their money, what they spend their money on, okay? Whether it's pornography or if it's strip clubs or if it's they giving it to their mom and they marry, that's what means the most to them. That's the closest to them. You know what I'm saying? If they spend it on their kids, money tells you a lot about people, how they act with money, how they use money, everything. It tells you a lot about people. So you knew you would be gone out of this earth. And instead of giving it to me, even if you thought that I wouldn't do right by your kids, because he had 3 kids out, we didn't have any kids together. Even if you thought I wouldn't do right by the kids, contingent, or because, with being a beneficiary, you can get 50%, you can get 10%, you can get 90%. You don't necessarily have to get the whole 100%, of, the life insurance. It could be a 50%. He didn't even want to give me 5%, guys. So that let me know what he really thought about me. You know what I mean? That let me know. I knew this man did not love me. I don't know what it was, why he was even I didn't even know why we was together. Like, I'm saying to myself, so if something happened to you today, and I can even see, guys, I can even see if I had a job. I had nothing. And at the time he got that policy, I was out of work. That's deep. That's deep. So I said all of that to say, and without going through all of that story ended actually with 2 or 3 weeks later. We were sitting in the kitchen talking, and I still hadn't said anything to him, still having sex with him, still going through the motions. And he's sitting in the kitchen in the window seat, and I'm cooking, and my back was to him. And he was like, yeah, see. And I knew this was my open door that God was giving me. He was like talking about, we was having a conversation about my brother, because my brother had actually borrowed money from him. And he was like, yeah, and he this and he that, he didn't pay me back my money, whatever. And that couldn't be me. See, I don't hold secrets. Like, I know he didn't tell Kendall that, whatever. I don't hold secrets from people. I don't hold back. I don't do this, I don't do that. I don't do this. I would have told you if that was me. And that was it. That was my open door. And I turned around. I said, oh, yeah. If that was me, I would have told you. I would have done. I say, you would have told me. So you don't keep no secrets. No, I don't keep no secrets from you. I don't do it. I knew at that moment that was the open door. And when I said, so why did you put your mom as your beneficiary on your life insurance? Guys, when I tell you, when people don't have enough time to think of a lie or they not prepared for what's getting ready to hit them, it's a whole different look. It's a whole different, it was nothing. He was like a deer in the headlights. He looked like his eyes bugged. Like, how did she know that? And so, what do you mean? And I'm just going to give you this last part of it, and I'm done with it. And now, because there's so many components, it's so many layers to this whole situation. So I said, yeah, you made your mom. And I said, and if that wasn't enough, if something had happened to her, you gave it to your sister, who's well off, that didn't even. And I'm sitting here with nothing. He was like, oh, I only did that because I couldn't think of no other name at the time. Huh? Okay. So I'm gonna leave that right there. I'm your wife for 4.5 years. I walked in the door. I walked out the door that morning. We live together. We sleep together. You couldn't think enough. No, you couldn't. Right now, you can't think of a lie because you didn't have any time to think about it. But I'm gonna leave that right there, guys. I'm not gonna hold you. This is okay. So basically, the face of freedom. What does that look like to you? In the nutshell, God got me out of it. God will always provide a way of escape. As the time went on, more things happened. Infidelity kicked in. More things happened. It was layers on top of upon layers upon layers. His clothes. We heard a big crash in the closet. His clothes fell down on one side. My clothes were still up. It was like somebody took his side and just snatched it down. A week later from that happening, a woman called me that he had been sleeping with. And I'm gonna leave it right there. But the face of freedom, and I used to tell this when I would talk, to other people that would go through the same things. I would always say, this will not be my story 10 years from now. And just to give you some background, I prayed. Some people have no intention on changing. Only God knows the heart and the crevices and the deep things of people. He searches the deep things in people. And it's either he provides you a way of escape or you deal with it and stay there. I chose the way of escape. And it's 10 years ago this year that I've been divorced. Again, I couldn't wrap my head around sitting in continual disrespect, sitting in continual psychological games and warfare. So for some people, they'll ride that thing out. It'll give them all kinds of diseases, sickness, and they'll ride it out. But for some, God has provided a way of escape. Do not ignore the red flags. Do not ignore the faces of freedom, because freedom is sometimes come in the form of a word. It comes in the form of obedience. Had I never looked in that thing, the next day he came in. The next day he got a call and he was no longer going to be on that job anymore, which means he was now going to be at home with me the very next day until the next job, because he was a contractor. So he got a call saying that job was over. Had I waited a day longer, I would never have been able to get them keys to look in there, because for one, he would have been home with me. And for two, he would not have been driving that work truck. He would have been in his car. I would never have been able to get them keys because the next job didn't come. I don't even know when the next job came. I can't even remember, but that would have never happened for me. Had I let it go for 2 to 3 weeks. And finally I just decided to look. And the next day he said he's done with that contract and he'll, look for something else or whatever. Had I not been obedient. So I said all of that today. My deliverance came in the form of a small, still voice and a word that pressed me. So I'm saying all of that to say that sometimes your deliverance come in a form of an instruction. And in the words of Mark Murdoch, he has so much wisdom. He said, if you trace the tragedies in people's life, you will find that there was some ignored instruction or what we call red flags or something God told you to do that you never did. And if you trace the tragedies, it'll trace all the way back to that ignored simple instruction. You looking for a big thing, God is like, this is it right here. And then my biggest thing with that is you never know when the instruction is going to come again. That may have been your last instruction. And then sometimes he'll just give you over to that thing that's oppressing you. So obedience is better than sacrifice. Well, while I'm sacrificing, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Obey. So that's that, guys. And that's pretty much a word in and of itself. I don't even think I need to go any further with that. So thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And if there's bondage or confusion, just know God is not there. I don't care how you slice it. I don't care how you try to justify it in your head. And I'm telling you things that I do and have done. No matter how we justify it and want it to be right, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty, not confusion and not bondage. God is not in that. And so I said all of that to say, I will see you in the next broadcast. Stay tuned. I have some amazing things coming and some amazing topics that we will be talking about. And I'm trying to keep these topics to a minimum so that, I can not drag this thing on and it can be within a well amount of reasonable time. But stay tuned. Thank you for tuning in to Live Free Broadcast, where we talk about living a life of freedom and liberty. Bye, guys.